fellow travelers. Welcome to the Pilari Presents South Africa podcast, which is a podcast that follows my tour of South Africa as a local, and it particularly focuses on cultural heritage tourism in the country. I'm your host, Pilari Pasha, and welcome. In today's episode, we are discussing Cape Agulhas. And let's start with what is significant about Cape Agulhas. So there isn't a lot of history here, or at least not a lot of history that I know of or could research. But what makes Cape Agulhas significant is that it is the most southern tip of the African continent. Well, actually, it is the southernmost tip of the African continent. Either way, it's just semantics. It does not matter. You get the idea. Another thing about it that makes it significant is that it is the actual location where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans meet. They do not meet at Cape Point. That is what is the popular belief that is out there. The belief is that the two oceans, being the Atlantic and Indian Ocean, meet at Cape Point. False. They actually meet at Cape Agulhas. And that's what we're discussing today. Um, with that said, I would like to first start off with what inspired me to go to Cape Agulhas. Well, what actually inspired me to go to Cape Agulhas or visit Cape Agulhas was the disappointment I had felt when I learned that the two oceans do not meet at Cape Point. So when I was first made knowledgeable about Cape Point, which was in September of 2006, I was in grade 8, and my father had been invited to a wedding in Cape Town, and it was also a work trip. So we spent like a week there. And so when he was not working and when we were not attending a wedding or wedding events, we would tour Cape Town. We would visit popular attractions in Cape Town. And one of the attractions he wanted us to go visit was Cape Point. And how he had sold Cape Point to me was that it is where the two oceans meet. You're gonna see, where these two oceans part. And so it stayed with me. It stayed with me because in 2006, although we did have that on our bucket list, visiting Cape Point, unfortunately we couldn't visit Cape Point because if I remember well, remember guys, this was back in grade 8, 2006. If I remember well, we were afraid that we were gonna miss our flight back home. So we tried to go to Cape Point, and when we saw that we were not reaching Cape Point, when we saw that we had been driving, over 30 minutes to get to Cape Point, we made the decision to turn back because it was very close to our flying time. If that's the correct way of saying it. And so we turned back. We went back. We went to the Cape Town International Airport, and guess what? When we got to the airport, we learned that our flight was delayed by 2 hours. Yeah, guys, we were so disappointed. We're like, we should have gone to Cape Point. We could have spent these 2 hours in Cape Point and still made it for the delayed flight. But it's life. You never know how things are gonna pan out, and we were just trying to be safe because an aeroplane never waits for anybody, right? And when you miss your flight, you lose your money, right? So that was very unfortunate. And so Cape Point really stayed with me for the longest time. For over a decade, it had been on my bucket list. And I told myself that when I go to Cape Town, Cape Point is going to be one of the first places that I visit. I want to see these two oceans and where they meet. I want to see this part that my dad had told me about. And so I finally, find myself in Cape Town as a master's student at GCT. And yeah, I had told myself that before I return home, before I finish this degree, I am going to see Cape Point and I'm going to see these two oceans. Eventually did that in 2019, as we discussed in the previous episode, and only to find out that the two oceans do not meet at Cape Point. I was so disappointed. I was like, I waited for a decade, over a decade. Because remember, this intrigue or curiosity about Cape Point had been put inside me since 2006, and I only got to visit Cape Point in 2019. So how many years is that? 13 years, I think. So for close to 13 years, I've always had this desire to go see Cape Point, and it was a very specific. And so to learn that specific reason why I wanted to go see Cape Point um, couldn't be fulfilled or couldn't be realized, uh, it was a disappointment. And so I researched. I was like, where do the two oceans meet? And when I learned that they meet at Cape Agulhas, I was very determined. I was like, I am not leaving Cape Town without seeing these two oceans. I am gonna make sure that I get to Cape Agulhas. And so, yeah, I managed to get to Cape Agulhas. For me to travel to Cape Agulhas shows how determined I was because, first of all, Cape Agulhas is over 200 kilometers away from Cape Town. It's actually 223 kilometers away from Cape Town, which is 3 hours when we measure it in time. And another thing was that I couldn't find a friend to travel with to Cape Agulhas. And, usually when at that time when I couldn't find friends, I would like wait for my friends. But my stay in Cape Town was drawing to a close. So I was like, I don't have time to wait for anybody. It's either now or never. And so I traveled to Cape Agulhas uh, solo. So I think this was my first solo trip, if I remember well. I'm not sure. Or let me say my first long distance solo trip. So that's how determined I was to go see these two oceans. And so, yeah, that's the inspiration, that disappointment that came from learning that they do not meet at Cape Point, and then also trying to fulfill a teenage wish of wanting to see the two oceans. Another thing was an image that I had seen on the internet when I googled Cape Agulhas and the two oceans, and there's this image that shows like these different waters that have this border running across them, these like the waves crashing in the middle of the ocean to show that these were two separate oceans. And I believed that image. I was so gullible. And so yeah, I went. I went and traveled to Cape Agulhas alone for 3 hours. So yeah, got to Cape Agulhas. Um and I was disappointed again. When I arrived there, because there was no demarcation in the water that showed, okay, this is the Indian Ocean, and this is the Atlantic Ocean, or this is where the Indian Ocean begins or ends, and this is where the Atlantic Oceans begins or ends. So there was no border in the water like I had seen and had expected to see, um uh because of that image I had seen on the internet. So yeah, it was a bit underwhelming traveling to Cape Agulhas, and I'm sure this is gonna be the first time I say on this podcast that visiting a destination was very underwhelming. The only demarcation that was, visible in the water, and I only saw this the second time around when I traveled to Cape Agulhas with family members. I'm gonna discuss that, a little bit later. And yeah, the demarcation does not go straight into the sea, or towards the horizon. It actually goes across the coast. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys can visualize what I'm trying to say. So basically, that line in the water that runs across the coast is created by a change or difference in colors between the shallow waters that are closer to the shore, and the deep waters that are further away from the shore. So the deep waters are dark blue, almost black. And then the waters that are closer to the shore are dark greenish, if I remember well. So that's the only demarcation you can see, which can still be like uh, amazing. It can create a sense of awe inside of you as you are driving towards Cape Agulhas, the national park, because you can see the coast. You're driving along the coast, and so to see these two waters, or two different shades of the water, can be what was the word I used earlier? It can, you know, make you feel amazed. So yeah, that's the inspiration, that's the story behind visiting Cape Agulhas, and a brief um idea of what my experience of traveling the place was like. So let's get into the specifics of it. Where is Cape Agulhas? Well, Cape Agulhas is a national park, also known as Agulhas National Park. So it's also a South African national park, or for short, a sand park. And it is located in the coastal town of Al Agulhas. So that's where it is. Like I said, it's 223 kilometers away from Cape Town. That's if you're coming from the Cape Town direction. So it's about a 3 hour drive. And it's located in the Western Cape. And how you can get there: when you are traveling from Cape Town, uh, you will have to join the N2, and then you follow the N2 until you get to a point where you have to turn onto the R317. The R317 is going to lead you onto the R319 when you get to Bredasdorp. And Bredasdorp is a town that is about 37 kilometers away from Cape Agulhas. Or if we're going to measure it in time, it's about 30 to 36 minutes away from Cape Agulhas. So that's the the way that you can get there when you're traveling from Cape Town. And when you're traveling from the direction of George or Swellendam, um, you are gonna, of course, be on the N2. And then, however, from this direction, you're gonna turn onto the R319, and it is gonna take you all the way to Cape Agulhas. And you're gonna also pass Bredasdorp, and then, eventually arrive at Cape Agulhas. And how I know there's two different routes, which are actually not that different. It just depends on the direction that you're coming from, right? How I know about it is the first time when I traveled solo, I took the N2, then the 317, eventually joined the 319. That was when I was traveling solo. And then when I was traveling with family members for my graduation in 2022, we decided to make like a road trip out of it. So me and my parents drove all the way from Pretoria onto the N3, uh, fetched family in KZN. Of course, we slept a bit, had an overnight stay over there, and then we went to Mthatha to meet other family members. And then from Mthatha, we traveled all the way to Cape Town through Beaufort West, George. Um, we passed Mossel Bay, so that's the direction that we were traveling in. And so when we were on this road, my dad was like, "You've seen Cape Agulhas. I want to see Cape Agulhas." That's my dad. When I've been to a place, he wants to see the places that I've been to. So yeah, so as we were traveling to Cape Town, my dad was like, "I want to see Cape Agulhas. I want to see where the two oceans meet." I was like, "Okay, I'll take you." And we drove, and that's where we had to take a turn onto the R319. I have to say, when you're driving to Cape Agulhas, there's gonna be a long duration of time, maybe like an hour at least. Especially after you've turned onto the R319 or 317, yeah, depending on which direction you come from, whether that be Cape Town or the direction of George and Swellendam. After you've made that turn, there's going to be a long, long distance where you do not see any civilization. Do not be terrified. I promise you, you will eventually get to see, civilization. Remember, you are going to the ends of the African continent. So it makes sense that, civilization will become less and less and less. By civilization, I mean towns. You see less and less of towns as you're traveling to Cape Agulhas after you've turned onto the R319 or R317. At first, yeah, this was terrifying, guys, because I was solo. Remember, I was traveling solo. So there was a moment where I was like, "Yo, guys, where am I going? Why am I doing this to myself? What if I'm going to like drop off the end of the world? I'm gonna fall off the end of the world because there are no towns, there are no people, there's nothing. And I was really seeing cars at the time, during that first trip to Cape Agulhas. So I was scared. The only thing that comforted me was that I was navigating. So I trusted Google or Google Maps. I trusted that Yazin, Google knows things, and they won't, lead me astray. So as long as I could see on the map that I am, driving towards a destination, I haven't lost track. um I felt a little comforted. So yeah, I had built a little relationship with Google prior to that, because I had traveled to other destinations within Cape Town and outside of Cape Town, but still, to not see any towns, any cars, any people can be terrifying. Do not worry, you will eventually see Bredasdorp. But there will also be a few towns before that, before you get to Bredasdorp, and so that can be a little bit comforting. But yeah, there will be a long, long distance, a long duration of time when you will not see it. But what compensates this is that, oh, the views, guys. I'm a sucker for views, especially when I'm in a car and I'm just driving through the landscape. Oh, like my heart just lives for that. I feel the most alive during such moments where it's just me and the open road and the scenery. So the views do, compensate, I think. Or for me, it kept the views kept the fear at bay. Cause when I'd be like, when I'm gonna arrive, and I'd be like, oh wow, look at the sunflowers, it's so beautiful, so they were distracting. Basically, they distracted me from the fear. So the views are agricultural views, so you'll see farms or crops. You will see open fields, and um, I think it also depends on what time of the year you're traveling in. At the time of the year that I was traveling in, which was in December, the grass had this like um yellow color to it. It was some patches of land would be like very green, and then other patches of land would be like yellow, amber type of feel, you know? And then you also see these wind turbines. And for those who do not know what wind turbines are, they are those towers that convert wind into electricity. They look like windmills, but like modern windmills. And to see them alone in this open environment, this open land, standing tall, they look so glorious. They're man-made, yes, but they still have something glorious about it. Um, yeah, I liked seeing that. Um, so yeah, do not worry. Concentrate on the views and let the views distract you from the fear or from feeling the fear and in its intensity, because the fear will be there, but the views will like kind of like limit the intensity of the fear. Okay, so what can you expect when you get to Cape Agulhas? Like I said, Cape Agulhas can be a very underwhelming place to visit. But what is breathtaking about it is the thought or the idea, or at least for me, when I was like, this is it. It's not as beautiful as Cape Point. Do not expect Cape Point when you get to Cape Agulhas. So for me, I had expected Cape Point. So when I got there, I was like, this is all there is. It's just a beach. It's just a beach. So it felt underwhelming for me. But when I thought about it, when I remembered that, hey, Piladi, you are standing at the end of the African continent. You are standing at the southern end of the African continent. Like, you cannot go further than this. The African continent does not go further than where you are standing. That can be breathtaking. And when you look, ahead to the horizon and think to yourself, like, there's nothing beyond that. That is the end of the earth. The only thing beyond that is most likely the South Pole, right? And maybe Antarctica. But yeah, so that thought, that idea is what made Cape Agulhas very breathtaking for me. However, other than that, there are some attractions that you can see other than the, just thinking to yourself that, hey, I'm at the most southern tip of the continent, or the southernmost tip of the continent. There is other attractions, and the first being the Cape Agulhas lighthouse. That's the first you're gonna see when you enter or arrive at Cape Agulhas. It's this lighthouse, and according to the history, to the research that I was able to make on its history, this lighthouse was the third lighthouse to be built in South Africa, and it is the second oldest that is still operating in South Africa. The first is in the first oldest lighthouse that is operating in South Africa is in Greenpoint in Cape Town. So that's, the significant thing about this lighthouse, that it is the second oldest that is still operating, and it was built back in 1848 and first lit on the 1st of March in 1849. And so this lighthouse is not just something that you can witness from outside. It is also open to the public, so you can enter into the lighthouse and then, climb to the top of the lighthouse. When I was there, I saw people at the top of the lighthouse watching, the views all around them, the surrounding views, because you can see the oceans ahead of you, and then you can see the town and green landscapes behind the lighthouse. And this lighthouse opens from 9 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. And there are tickets, to the lighthouse. Well, according to my research. And I'll clarify on why I seem to have doubt about the ticket aspect of things later, just now. But according to the Transnet National Ports Authority website, which is the organization that is in charge of the lighthouse, their website says that tickets to the lighthouse is 13 rand 70 cents for adults, and then there are discounts for children under the age of 12 and students with valid student cards, and also for pensioners. So do not forget your documents, guys. When you do carry your documents with you, it does make things cheaper for you. At least that's what I experienced as a traveler, especially when I was a student. Like, no matter where I went in the country, as long as I had my student card with me, it really halved the price for me. So take advantage of your age and your status, right, in society. It is an advantage. And like I said, there was confusion over tickets and entry rates and prices. I kind of alluded to that earlier. And this is because, when I first traveled to Cape Agulhas on my solo trip, first solo trip, when I did research, because I'm that girl, especially when I'm traveling solo, I make thorough research because it's comforting. It's comforting to me. It makes it feel less terrifying to go to a place because you feel like you have some knowledge. You feel like you have some control. Traveling solo can make you feel a little bit out of control, especially when you traveling to a place for a first time. But when I have, thorough research, I feel like, yeah, okay, I'm okay, I'm good. I have a plan A, I have a plan B, I have a plan C. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be okay. You have what's the thing, what's it called, crisis control. You're prepared for any crisis that can come up come about during your travels. So yeah, the first time I traveled, I did the thorough research, and I learned that you have to pay ticket prices, but there were so many different ticket prices. I couldn't understand what was happening, and so I carried a lot of money when I traveled to Cape Agulhas, only to find out that nobody's gonna ask me for my money, right? When I arrived to Cape Agulhas, I remember I was looking for the gate. I was like, which one is the gate? And should I park here or should I drive all the way? Like, it was weird. There's nobody that's standing at a gate welcoming you, telling you where to go. No, it's a free for all, right? It's a very open place. So I didn't pay when I got to Cape Agulhas. I just, took pictures of the lighthouse and then went straight to the southern tip of the continent, and that was it. And I remember I felt a little hesitant. I'm like, I'm waiting for somebody to be like, hey, this is where you come and pay. And when I left Cape Agulhas and still nobody asked me for my money, I was like, oh, okay. Okay, so then what was that about? Why were there so many prices listed on different websites? So yeah, that's where my confusion is. There are prices listed, but my experience, both experiences actually, because remember I said I had traveled to Cape Agulhas again for a second time with family members. Both experiences paid nothing. Um, but because I never entered the lighthouse, just to be safe, I would advise you guys that, do carry that extra, 20 or 50 rand, depending if you're traveling solo or with, a friend or a group of friends. Um, you know, and you want to go into the lighthouse, just carry that extra pocket money or change, just in case if you do get there and they say, hey, you have to pay an entrance fee. I never got into the lighthouse because both times when I traveled to the lighthouse, I got there after 5 p.m. So I just assumed that, if I can go in, or if people are allowed to go in, I most likely won't get in because it's after 5 o'clock. So that's my confusion. Do your research. I trust that the people who are listening to this podcast are smart people. Yes, who do their research. So yeah, do take that into account. Don't just take my word for things. Also do your own research, please. Please, just use this podcast as a starting reference, right? Not as the only reference. Okay, and then another attraction is the southernmost tip monument. And this is just a monument or a beacon, to say, that designates the tip of the tip as the official meeting place of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. So this beacon does kind of like uh, draw a line on the shore, on the beach shore, uh, to show, okay, this side is where the Atlantic Ocean is, and then the other side is where the Indian Ocean is. So it's kind of like an imagined line, right? I think it's kind of like they kind of like trying to like approximate that this is where, they could possibly meet, because there is no border in the water, like I remember. So that indication is on the beach shore, and it's a man-made indication. I'm struggling to describe it, but yeah, it does kind of like try to show that, uh, uh, where one ocean begins and another ends, but it's on the shore, it's on the beach. And then I think this is the most popular attraction. If you were to look it up on the internet, you'd see pictures of this beacon or this monument, more than anything else. This is the one that will pop up. Yeah, so just, Google Cape Agulhas and it, or say Cape Agulhas beacon, and I'm sure it'll pop out and you'll see what I'm trying to say. And on this monument, another thing about it is that there is a map of Africa, right? There's a map of Africa, a steel sculpture or a metal sculpture of the African continent that's lying on the floor. It's very massive and you can walk around it. So it's quite interesting if you know some spots of Africa. Like I remember I could identify the Drakensberg Mountains on the sculpture, and I think Kilimanjaro as well. Yeah, so if you're traveling solo, it can like um, make you a little more entertained. If you're weird like me. Yeah, it can uh, uh, distract you from the loneliness of solo travel. Yeah, yeah, because it can be lonely sometimes. And that day I did feel a little lonely. So when I got to this map of the African continent, I forgot that loneliness because I was just kind of like distracted by identifying all these popular destinations on the map. And this map also has a pathway that leads to the beacon. So these are the two popular attractions at Cape Agulhas, the lighthouse and the monument. There's another attraction which is the Meisho Maru 38 shipwreck. I'm not sure if that's Japanese or Chinese. It sounds like that. I'm assuming it is. Let me not say it sounds like it. I'm assuming it is. Yeah, so it's the Meisho Maru 38 shipwreck. I didn't see it both times that I was there. I was shocked to learn that there's a third attraction. Why do I keep missing the shipwrecks, guys? So yeah, there is a third attraction, but to my credit, there are no signs that indicate that there's a third attraction that one can get to see. The lighthouse is the obvious thing because the first thing you see when you get to Cape Agulhas, and then the monument has a sign that says, there's a tourism board that leads you to the monument, that shows that, okay, that's where the southernmost tip of the African continent is. However, for the shipwreck, there's nothing. You only get to see that on the internet. So don't be like me and miss this attraction. In fact, if you do get to go to Cape Agulhas, please go see this shipwreck in my honor and then come back and tell me, tell me about it. You can leave comments now on Spotify, on YouTube. So come, tell me about what was it like for you viewing the shipwreck at Cape Agulhas. So these are the attractions that you can see when you get to Cape Agulhas. Another thing that I wanted to address or mention or, highlight before we get to the end of this episode uh, was, this week's State of the Nation. The headlines that I want to discuss are very local headlines because this is a podcast that is focused on South Africa. And that is um, fuel costs have been increased again. So, in addition to the price hike we saw on the 1st of January of this year, there's been another price hike as from today, the 5th of February 2025. So, that does take up the cost of fuel up again. So just be aware of that as usual. Make room for that in your budget, in your travel budget. If you're planning to travel your home country soon, if you're a South African, or if you are planning to travel to South Africa, if you're an international. So just be aware that there is that change in prices. So yeah, those are the things that I wanted to address and make you aware of. And with that said, we've reached the end of this podcast. Thank you for listening. Keep good, make good choices, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye.